Okay. Oh, and Hannah's about to rejoin. That's fine, no problem. Okay, so if you've got any questions, I'm going to deliver we've got round robin really between myself, Lara, and Adam for the next wee while. And if you've got any questions as we go, please pop them in the chat or jot them down so that you remember them at the end. And we'll do our best to answer the questions, here tonight. And if not, we'll get back to you after the session as well. All of the slides we can share with you at the end, although most of the content is already on the website and in the documents, the important stuff of what you need to do next. So that's roughly the format. If I just move on. So the overview of this session, what we're hoping to cover tonight is give you a bit of a background to why, and we feel it is important spending time on understanding why we're making these changes for standards for deployment. This isn't Paddle Scotland or Paddle UK coming up with a whole load of more hurdles, as some people might perceive them. These are actually really well intentioned and based on a number of events that have happened prior to now. So really just setting the scene so that we're all understanding and on message with that. We'll give you the detail of the requirements for the clubs and for individuals, and then some practicalities of how to implement some of these, and we'll hopefully get into some discussion on what that means in your club and get some discussion at the end. So that's the plan for the session. So if we can just think about the timeline, this hasn't just happened last week. It's been announced to everyone in the community last Tuesday. A huge amount of work has happened over the last 2 to 3 years by staff and volunteers from Paddle Scotland, Paddle UK, Paddle Northern Ireland, and Canoe Wales over recent time. And these are there's 3 incident things on this particular timeline, and then some consultations. But I'll go into them in a wee bit more detail. But I think just noting that these are substantial moments in time that we need to learn from. These are in particular fatalities on the screen that we, in some of those cases, things that shouldn't have happened, but did happen either in our sport or in other sports. There people have been abused or harmed, and we need to learn from these particular reports and findings and take that into our setting. The White Review was published in, I think, late 2022, and that was from Anne White QC into allegations of abuse in gymnastics, and that's the ramifications across the whole of the sporting sector. So whilst those are specific recommendations to gymnastics, we can't ignore those. We've got the MEIB report for paddleboarding deaths in October 2021, I think. And then the Great Orme, which was actually in 2018, a 15-year-old scout who died, but the final inquest was only published in February this year. As part of all of this, the public landscape on this, Sport England and UK Sport made a commitment to develop a national workforce registration scheme for coaches to include their qualifications and suitability for work. So this is one step away from formal regulation like you might have as teachers and dentists and doctors and various other professions, but it's an important step. The Scottish Government and Sport Scotland haven't yet made such a commitment, although they are engaged in the conversations around that, and we can't ignore it. There's some key events on the screen as we've discussed. Sorry, and it's also worth saying there were some consultation events. I don't think anyone in this particular call was involved in that, but we did have a number of clubs involved in consultations last autumn, and the clubs involved there, I think, were accepting that this was the way forward. If not, people maybe aren't entirely happy with that as a let's do lots more training, but actually the need for it was something that was had good acceptance. The timeline from here on, so we've launched in May 2024, the guidance, the policies, all of the infrastructure around it, webinars. This is the first of 2 at the minute, although we will have more once we get to the autumn as well in more detail. And this initial support phase, which we'll talk about in a few minutes as well, around free e-learning and discussions with clubs. the free, we're highlighting this free e-learning. It is only available for the first 3 months. We really want people to engage in it. And then the support will be ongoing. We've recruited Adam as a new member of staff today, and his role is really key to the rollout of standards for deployment and the support available to clubs. But the two key deadlines we need you to have in mind is December 2024 and December 2026, and we'll explain in much more detail exactly what those two, what the requirements of those two deadlines are. So in terms of the scope of standards for deployment, so who does it apply to, I guess is what we're saying here. It applies to, there's two overarching policies produced by Paddle UK, one applying to clubs and one applying to everyone else, commercial providers, including delivery partners. But it's important to say that this isn't limited to organisations or individuals that are within a membership or an affiliation to Paddle Scotland, Paddle England, etc. These are going to become industry standard or national accepted thing. They'll be referred to by insurers that actually opting out of membership or opting out of affiliation isn't going to get you out of the scope of these requirements. You may be asked less questions because you're not accountable to someone at that point in time. But I guess I'm just, trying to make everyone aware that actually, no matter who you are and how you operate, these are the benchmark, these are the reference point that will be used by a range of different organisations. And in the event of something terrible going wrong, it's what you would be questioned against if you're at a fatal accident inquiry or such thing as well. So that's the scope. Now, the why, and we really want people to get this message and help share it with others, because we recognise that some of these requirements won't come as good news to some people, and we really want to get you actually, this is about protecting people, protecting participants, and protecting you as coaches, leaders, club officials, whatever role you're in. We want everyone to have fun in paddle sport, absolutely, but we want that to be done in a safe way, both with safety and safeguarding at the forefront. We're the governing body for the sport and for the collection of the disciplines, so we need to have the right systems and processes in place that are, best practice with, again, safety and safeguarding at the fore. We need to learn lessons, so we're learning lessons from incidents, some fatalities and other serious incidents within our sport and across the wider sporting sector. So not all of the cases that we're talking about are in paddle sport, absolutely, but whether it's gymnastics or mountaineering and scouts and so on, there's still tragic accidents that have learning that we must take on board. And I think as that final point there, it lists some of them. So the Marine Accident Investigation Branch, which was Haverfordwest in Wales, the Kerry River was an incident in Ireland. The Great Orme was the Scout one in Wales in 2018. So we really need to think differently here. We need to use this as a turning point for how we deliver our sport. I'm just going to there's 3 slides here to highlight some of and I say we will circulate these slides at the end as a PDF, but we've sort of highlighted some of these. This is a small snippet of a section from the inquest report into the Great Orme, which is a 15-year-old scout who fell off a cliff on a scouting expedition where the leaders were not authorised to be where they were. There's, a huge list of things that went wrong that resulted in that young man's death. And, you can read some of them on the screen there. To do with risk assessments, the planning, approval, not having participant lists, and so on. And ultimately, this shouldn't have happened. Just to give you a summary, it's Ben Leonard, who was 16-year-old. He suffered fatal head injuries when he fell 200 feet from a cliff while he was on an explorer trip in 2018. And there's been a couple of different inquiries, but the most recent one, there was a sort of pause to it, the earlier one, and the most recent one published just in February. It's called the Prevention of Future Deaths Report. It's available for anyone to look at on the government website. And really, it's made some key observations around volunteers and the duty of care of volunteers to those young people. Now this includes the findings of this. The recommendations from this would be applicable to paddle sport organisations, to clubs like yourselves, and what's the term? There's a term that they've used called the responsible body, which would be Paddle UK or Paddle Scotland, because we have an implication in these things. There was poor weather on the trip, and a whole catalogue of things, I suppose, led to what happened. That not on that slide there, but I think 4 important points to take away from this is the inquest concluded that the verdict of unlawful killing by the Explorer Scout leader and assistant leader. So directing really at those 2 leaders on that trip, and saying it was contributed to by the neglect of the Scout Association as well. The 2 leaders involved may now face prosecution for manslaughter. This is very live in progress. And the Scout Association was criticised for its approach to training and risk management. So, there's some quite sobering facts in there and alerts that none of us want anyone in our sport to be in that position where we find this tragic accident like this happening, and that we're or the volunteers involved, who are of course well-meaning, are suddenly facing themselves potentially with a manslaughter charge. Appreciate in Scotland it is a slightly different terminology. If we move on to the marine accident investigation, so this is to do with the death of 4 paddleboarders in Wales. This was a commercial trip run by a very small business, a sort of 2-person operated business. One of the owners of the business was one of the 4 who died, and the surviving leader is, I think as it says on there, it was arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. That's still ongoing, and we don't know where that is headed next. But a lot of words on the screen there that you can read in slower time. But really, the headlines here, people weren't told of the risks. The people that were leading this trip weren't qualified to do it. This was entirely avoidable, tragic and avoidable, as the headline in the bottom right says. We've also got the White Review, which is an enormous 300 and odd page report from related to allegations of abuse in gymnastics, and there's a whole series of recommendations in it. 3 that we're highlighting here to do with mandatory safeguarding training, and the role of welfare officers in clubs and qualifications, and also to do with the contact that British Gymnastics, in this case where it says BG, that means British Gymnastics, and about the role that they as the governing body need to have with clubs. So it's not good enough to just have policies in place and expect other people to follow them. You need to have other mechanisms in place to check, to audit, to check understanding, and to really maintain the governance. So again, quite a serious number of, and that report, the numbers in it are quite horrifying of the volume of abuse that was going on in gymnastics, and I think we can't pretend that we're immune from that in our sport either. So we do need to learn very carefully from the White Review. So I think I'm handing over to Lara next.
Great, thank you, Andy. Some sobering background there, obviously, to how we've got to where we've got to. Between us now, we're going to flick through pretty quickly a summary of what's in the guidance for clubs, and we'll run through this and then delve into some of the detail a bit more as we go. So the first bit we'll look at is the club level requirements, so things that need to happen across the whole club. What's already happening, that top set of bullet points is what clubs are already doing and is already a requirement. The new information that we're now needing you guys to be pulling together is health and safety policy, more risk assessment, code of conduct, equality, disciplinary policy, and safeguarding adults policy. There's templates for all of these policies available for you guys to be able to access and download, and we'll share with you where you'll find those later on. We'll need a copy of those by the end of the year from the club. And then by the end of 2026, there are two key dates that Andy mentioned at the beginning. By the end of 2026, you guys have got those publicly available. Now, obviously, some clubs will be all over some of this already, and we'll have these policies in place, and we'll probably have some of them on their websites. So, fantastic. It doesn't mean you need to take the foot off the gas. If you've just got one or two that tidy that circle up nicely, then that's great. So the next, we've got the last slide was all about the whole club, and now we just look very quickly at the club committee members. So we're needing all members to be identified in Just Go as committee members. There's some specific roles there, but there's also a club official role too. So that helps us understand who your club officials are within the committee. As a minimum, we'd expect clubs to have a chair, secretary, treasurer, and safeguarding officer as named individuals. And the club committee members need to have completed two courses, the Introduction to Safeguarding training or Sports Scotland Board and Committee Safeguarding e-learning. So that's a new requirement that's come in. Again, links to all of these to be shared, and we can make sure that the information is out there for you guys to get hold of. So that's required by the end of 2024. I think Andy's up next with the club safeguarding officer.
Yep, thanks, Lara. So about 2/3 of our clubs do have children in them, and a third don't have any children. Until now, we've said every club with children needs to have a club safeguarding officer, and clubs without any children don't. Moving forward, we are going to require every club to have a safeguarding officer, and that's because we deal with safeguarding for adults as well as children. And in fact, the number of cases and the complexity of the cases is certainly on the increase in recent time, and we are dealing with more and more cases to do with adults. So that's one of the requirements moving forward, and I guess we're just reaffirming the minimum requirement for the two training courses, CWPS as we call it, and CWPO, those two things at the top of that slide. We do have a number of club safeguarding officers that still don't have this in place. We send numerous reminders, and we are faced with some cases, live cases at the moment, that are made more complex because people don't have the training in place. So we really want to emphasize the importance of training and that training being refreshed. We wouldn't expect someone to go and be a first aider without first aid training. So why would we expect someone to be a safeguarding officer without safeguarding training? It's absolutely crucial. We're also, I guess, as part of the wider thing here, this code of conduct issue, there is an e-learning code of conduct. It's free. It takes a very short time. We've had reasonable uptake to it, but we are mandating that for a number of different roles moving forward. So part of that is that by the end of this year, we'll expect all club safeguarding officers to complete the free code of conduct e-learning. Okay.
Cool. So next up is a club safety officer. So this is a new requirement we're asking for each club to have. So we're asking for that person base to have a bit of a bigger overview of safety for the club and club events as well, and to completed the Paddle UK risk assessment and risk management e-learning, complete the Paddle UK event safety management training as well, and that needs to be refreshed every 3 years as well, and complete either the Paddle UK introduction, safeguarding, or Sports Scotland child and wellbeing training as well.
Rattling rattling through these, folks, and I appreciate that there's a lot to take in. This is all taken directly from the documentation, so you can read that in slow time. The next one then is club trip organisers, team leaders, and other similar organising roles. These specific roles might vary between clubs, but in broad terms, they're people who have a responsibility for those who are attending club trips or competitions, going away away from the base for club events. The e-learning, the Paddle UK risk assessment and risk management e-learning, that's it's not the first time we've seen that on the screen, and equally the safeguarding training as well. So two familiar ones on here.
Sorry, I pressed the button to click on something there. Is that right? Chaperones, yep.
Yeah, so chaperones basically is us looking at the people supporting young paddlers, so anyone under the 18, but also adults at risk, and that's really important that we are remembering that as well. It's not just young people, but it's also adults that are at risk. And we're asking these take care and ensure that appropriate training's in place. And again, we've got very similar bits of training coming up here, which has completed the child welfare and protection safety and completed the Paddle UK Code of Conduct for the coaching workforce as well.
So event organisers have probably a greater need for understanding and training to be able to oversee club events safely and successfully. So the requirements for our club organisers, event organisers, will be, again, safeguarding, the risk management and e-learning, and the event safety training too. So again, we're getting you getting the picture, hopefully, that actually when we distill it down, there's not too much in here. Alongside that, we've got our club event safeguarding officers. So they're obviously supporting young people at those events. And both of these things are required by the end of 2024. If I take us on to the formal instructing, coaching and leading, and you'll be glad that this is the last of the quick fire sections for us to go through. So by the end of this year, anyone providing formal instruction, coaching or leading within the club must have these things in place. So deployed by the club, a member of Paddle Scotland, identified on Just Go by their role, have their safeguarding training, and have done the code of conduct for coaching workforce e-learning. So again, it's things that we can attend to within the staff team. It's mainly an administrative and training focus here. I think it's important to think about the definition of what we mean by formal instruction, coaching and leading, because there is other activity that falls outside of that. So the definition from the documentation talks about the activity having a specific focus and responsibility of instruction, coaching, or leading others. It would be planned and organised and sanctioned by the club, covered by the club safety framework. So when we talked about the safety officer earlier on, they would be covered by that, and something that's actively promoted by the club. Insured within the club, obviously within the club affiliation. And in situations like this, we'd expect the coach, the leader, the instructor is being viewed as being responsible for leading the session, for managing safety, enforcing rules, enforcing club policies in terms of the way things are happening, and making informed decisions in response to changing conditions, dynamic risk assessment, or emergencies. And participants' role within that would be about following the lead of their coach, their instructor, their leader, acting responsibly, following club rules, but very much the coach, the leader, the instructor has got good experience behind them, qualifications behind them to keep people safe, who need that level of support themselves. If we look at the next slide, that tells us what we need by the end of 2026. So we also need by this point, and this is probably one of the biggest significant changes within the new standards is that we need all of those people who are delivering that kind of activity to hold a British Canoeing Awarding Body qualification, meet the CPD coach update requirements, and have a first aid certificate. So that's required by the end of 2026. And I think the next slide, Andy, that this will build this slide up here. Everything above the red line here, the green block, is, think about that space as being everything that you guys do within your club. So all the activity that's happening out there. And what helps keep that safe is the club level requirements, the very first thing that we ran through in terms of what's required. So requirements on the committee, the policies, the role requirements, the safety officer. That's all the stuff that will keep everything that you do safe and keep people protected. In addition, there's some extra layers in there which provide another layer of support. So if you're doing club trips, then we've got our club trip organizer and our chaperone requirement. So that just helps those activities be a bit safer because they need an extra layer. We've also got events that we might offer. You click on, Andy. If we're running events within the club, you've got your event safeguarding officer and your event organizer. So again, an extra layer in here of things to help make events safer. And then the last one up is formal coaching and leading and guiding. So those requirements that we've just looked at for coaches, leaders and instructors, where we might be doing things like taster sessions, coach sessions where there's a focus on skill development, or leaders taking people out in that led environment. One of the reasons I wanted to put this slide up here is that the green stuff, there's still bits left in there, which will have loads of other things that you guys do within your club activity that don't fall into the trips, the formal coaching and leading, or the events. All that other type of activity that each club will do, which is generally supported by that stuff at the bottom, the club level requirements, the policies you've got in place, your safety officer supporting good decision making, good constraints around how some of those things might happen, and the role requirements and the training that people have had. So we've got a really well-trained committee supporting all club activity, and then we've got a couple of extra layers in to add, bolster things up a bit in some areas which are known to be a bit more problematic. You can see that there's just catching my eye on the meeting chat.
We'll come back to the questions as we get to the end, if that's all right.
Okay.
So you're back to me. Thanks, Lara. Just to summarise the deadline, because there's a lot of information has just flown by your screens in the last few minutes. The 2024 deadline is focused around club policies, which some of which you do have in place already, and the rest, you know, there's some of those you can just adopt the Paddle Scotland policy, but you are affiliated clubs in your own right. Your clubs that can choose, and the reason that we're not mandating our policies to apply is because we've got university clubs, 8 or 9 of those. We've got multi-sports clubs, and we've got some clubs that are under of jurisdiction of another entity, and we can't then say you must follow our policy if they also have a similar, and hopefully not too conflicting, but it might sort of be some overlap. So that's why we do say you can either adopt our one or you can create your own equivalent one. But the encouragement there is don't spend lots of time creating policies or doing things. The straightforward thing is to have a committee meeting and say, we're required to have a policy for A, B, C, and D. We're adopting the Paddle Scotland version, and record that in your committee minutes and then upload that in your credentials. So that's point one. Secondly is updating the records of who's in which role. Lots of clubs already do this. We know who every secretary is, hopefully who every safeguarding officer is, and some of the chairs, some other committee members, but not all. So the task there is to do some ticks in the role section by the end of the year. Safeguarding training is required for most of the roles that we've described. Lots of people already have it in place, so we're certainly not starting at zero, but there will be some gaps and people that need to complete the e-learning or perhaps the CWPS course in short time, and encourage them to do the e-learning in particular if that applies in the next 3 months. And some roles will also require the risk management e-learning. So that's sort of the key headlines in the short term, but we also shouldn't take our eye off the ball for the 2026 deadline, because as Lara said, it's that's almost the bigger task. Sending people to do an hour or two of e-learning is something that's hopefully achievable in the short term, but getting people qualified may take longer and require certainly more time and money to make that happen. This is just a screenshot of one of the particular documents. So don't read this in isolation, but it is just a helpful guide to the title of the roles. You might call them something slightly different. In fact, it says Safeguarding Welfare Officer. We don't use the term welfare in Scotland, and in fact, England are moving away from that term as well. So we call it Safeguarding Officer. But these ticks across these 5 categories: membership, qualification, role-specific training, first aid and safeguarding, it will just give you an at-a-glance view of the types of things that they need to have in place. The actual category of membership and the role-specific training or the safeguarding-specific training will vary depending on each role. So, as I say, don't read this in isolation. Read the detail for each actual role to be sure. So again, I mean, it sounds like the bits I've delivered at the start and here are a bit doom and gloom and maybe trying to scare you, and that's certainly not the intention. We're trying to get you to understand why we're doing this and the reason about protecting you, protecting all the participants, and if we follow all of these steps, then actually we've got much less to worry about. This is about looking after everyone, including yourselves as committee members and leaders, coaches, instructors. So, above all, we need to learn these terrible accidents, including several fatalities, have happened, and the findings of those inquiries and other incident reviews have said, well, actually, if certain things had been in place, that may have been a different outcome. Those people may not have died, the abuse may not have happened, etc., etc. And therefore, we do need to learn about that. So what we are saying and what we believe to be the case is that if we put these measures in place, then there will be a positive impact on the safety and safeguarding of others. Less incidents, injury, and neglect may happen. So I guess just bear that in mind. Implications on club affiliation, I guess, is what we're saying is if clubs don't meet these requirements, we're going to do everything we can in the timelines to support you. We'll get extra resource, all the free e-learnings and tools that we'll come on to talk about in a minute. But ultimately, if clubs ignore this, then it will be a breach of the affiliation agreement, and we'll need to explore sanctions. It's not part of the plan, but I guess we're just highlighting that as an outcome if we have non-compliance. Insurance, I think I've got on the slide in a few minutes, but ultimately, if you fail to follow the recommendations of the governing body, then the insurance company will take a rather dim view on that and may decline cover in the event of a claim. And as we've seen earlier on, where the 2 leaders of the paddleboard trip and the 2 leaders of the scouting trip, are facing criminal proceedings potentially. It's still too early to know the outcomes of any of that, but none of us want to be in those positions. So ignoring these rules could place yourselves at risk. But again, let's take us back to if we follow all of these, and I'm not belittling the task of doing that, of all the training and the qualifications involved, but if we do follow these rules, then we can take part in the sport with the knowledge and comfort that we as the governing body and our insurers will be there to support you in the event of something still going wrong, because accidents do happen. We're never going to get anything that completely prevents injury or accidents, but we need to take all the reasonable steps that we can. 2 guidance documents. Some of you may have seen this. It was linked in the email that was circulated last week. You're focused as club people on the one on the right. So this is a PDF that's available on the website page. We'll send around all the links again at the end of the session. And the reason that we've got this specific document is that there are policy documents above this written by Paddle UK, which are not easy reading because the titles of things vary between the 4 national associations. So, you know, the names of our safeguarding courses or the names of our membership categories are different. So we've ended up with quite a complex and wordy policy document. So actually, rather than reading the policy document, read the guidance document instead and focus your attention on that. It's nicely laid out with headlines about the role and some nice coloured boxes about what you need to do by certain dates. So yeah, please focus on that one. And I'm not saying don't read all of the other documents, but if you really want to focus your attention on what do we need to do next, then it's the standards for deployment guidance for affiliated clubs you want to read. Over to Adam.
Sweet. So on to the good stuff. So we obviously recognize that every club is different and every club's going to be in a different place and need different levels of support. And that's why we've got 4 development managers here to kind of support you on that journey. Below is a kind of support we're going to be putting in place. But I guess the main thing I'd be saying to people is reach out, have conversations with us so we can look at how we can support you individually as a club. And that might be things on this list, or there might be other things that might just be being able to have a bit of a conversation as well, just to try and help put everything into perspective. But a bit of the bits that we're looking to do is we're continuing to do PVG processing. We are going to be doing some more webinars, and from those webinars, it'll be having a bit of a conversation with yourself. It will be doing webinars like tonight, which is a bit of an overview, but it might also be doing some specific webinars about specific bits of the guidance to try and support you on those bits as well. The club committee hub is on Brightspace as well, so that can be accessed, and we can look at what bits we can do to support you to make that all nice and easy for you as well. And like I said, direct support and advice, which I think is really going to be one of the key bits. Get in touch with us and we can sit down, have a look at conversation, and we can sit down, have a conversation and look at how we can support you to make this as easy as possible as well. We've got reporting systems in place at Just Go, and the club dashboard, which we're going to have a quick look at in a minute. As kind of been mentioned, there's discounted safeguarding courses, discounted risk assessment and risk management training as well as event safety training courses. We're going to be doing lots of connections, opportunities for people as well. And then the other bits that we're putting in place to support, because we're obviously aware that qualifications cost money, is that we're going to be looking at doing subsidized safety and leadership courses, but also looking at trying to support clubs to become as sustainable as possible. So if there's interest with people in your clubs about becoming riders, tutors, or of awards to try and make that a bit more sustainable for yourselves as well, then we'd love those people to kind of reach out and have a conversation with us as well, because we'll be looking at discounted kind of options for those people as well. Jump on to the next slide. Cool. So this is the club dashboard for those of you that might not have seen it. So I've used this previously in my previous role when I was at Willigate to manage a team of 30 plus instructors. And actually it's a phenomenal dashboard that really helps. It's allowed us to kind of keep track of everyone, how we're doing. Allowed us to keep track of how everyone is doing in terms of whether people got membership or not. So if someone hasn't got a membership, it comes up with a little red triangle, that tells us that we need to remind that person to get themselves membership. Also allows us to see whether people's first aid and safeguarding and their CPD are in place also. It also allows us, so the 3 extra ticks, they are allowing us to see if people have completed their Paddle Safer, their Paddle Start and Discover e-learning and able to provide those roles as well. So that can be really good. It is a really good way for us to start getting more people coming to the club, more personal performance awards as well. And also as you click on to anyone, you would be able to see what qualifications they currently have as well. So rather than needing to collect everyone's certificates, we can just click onto the members once we input them into here, and it will tell us exactly what qualifications and certificates they have in place.
Thank you, Adam. And back to me. So Just Go is our membership system. Some clubs also use it for a club subscription that they pay directly to Just Go. That's available to you as an extra if you wish to incorporate it with your club membership fees and all those other things. But the Just Go reports, we've just upgraded them last week, and this is available to every club, even if you don't have the extra subscription. It's a little bit more complicated than the nice colourful dashboard that Adam just showed you, but there will be some times where you have to go into much more detail. So this is a download spreadsheet that will show you all of your members, all of the roles that they might hold, qualifications, their memberships, and then the dates of all of these other things. So if you like spreadsheets, then you'll be absolutely fine with this. If you're a bit unsure with spreadsheets, then you might need some help. My colleague Matthew's in the middle of creating just a wee quick video, how-to video to show you how to download, add a filter to the first row, and then navigate through. So you might want to say, show me the committee members, and then you'll be able to check immediately. You can filter for the committee members and then immediately see how many of those have safeguarding training in place, for example, and then send them a wee prompt and say, don't forget to do this by the end of the year. We will be doing some reminders, some targeted things, but we can only contact the people who we know are in the roles. So that's why we are saying by the end of the year, we want you to update who is in which role in your club, because that will help us to help you with the compliance. And this will be a spreadsheet report that you can download live anytime you need. So that's Just Go reports. We also have a new, it's been live for about a year, in fact, Club Committee e-learning. It's in a platform called Brightspace. We started off, you'll see on the right-hand side, there's a whole range of different topics around club governance, record keeping, activities, wellbeing, protection, insurance, equality, diversity and inclusion. And we've now added in some new information there with standards for deployment. And in particular, under resources, there's a whole section with the template policies and also some role descriptions. So things like club safety officer and club event safeguarding officer are new roles that we've now got role descriptions for alongside club safeguarding officer. And there's also have been there for the last year, in fact, but there's role descriptions for things like club secretary, club chair, club treasurer and other things. So it, might be an opportunity to steal some templates and, help get the governance of your club slightly in better order if it's not already. So that's all available free. You need to register through that link, and you need to be a club committee member to get in as well. But if you get any problems accessing it, then please shout. I've also just put a plug on the bullet point layer funding directory. There is an excellent resource produced by the Scottish Sports Association last year. They do update it on a semi-frequent basis, but it's an enormous big PDF that's got lots of different places that you can apply to funding for. So we're all going to have to think creatively about how we can fund some of these courses in particular. Or whether it's for other things beyond the standards for deployment, but that's a useful resource as well. Over to Lara.
Great. A lot of the guidance and the documents that we've been sharing this evening we've got a dedicated page on the website for standards of deployment. Find it off the main menu at the top under the support section, and you'll find in there all of the guidance. You can see the different tabs on the screenshot there, with some of the policies and resources and download. So another way to get into some of the materials if you need it. Details of support, some of the FAQs and some of the policies. So it's a good place to go to get that initial information if you need it. It's up there now and ready to go.
Great, thanks, Lara. And can't remember, this is still Lara. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're all right. And the other, we've mentioned a few times some of the e-learnings that folks need to do, and that we've got available free until the 7th of August for those in roles requiring it. And essentially, all you need to do is request a discount code by completing a short form. That form is available. It's on the website link that we were just chatting about a second ago. The request is so essentially we get these half price from Paddle UK, and we then give you guys it for free at your end. So there is a limited time on this. They're available free until the 7th of August. So there's a big push here to for you guys to try and encourage those people in your clubs to access it, share the links to the things that they do, share the link to where they get the discount code from, that sort of thing, so we can get as many people through as possible before that deadline.
Great, thank you, Lara. And just to highlight, we've got 2 of the development managers on this call tonight, and the other 2, Roger Holmes and Callum McNichol, are there in some smiling pictures and happy times on the water. We've got a team of 4 people. They're involved in a whole range of different things, which includes supporting clubs, and standards for deployment this is really important to us. This needs to be successful because it's about the safety and safeguarding of all the participants and the protection of the leaders and the committee members and everyone else involved. So please get in touch. We do want to try and coordinate things as best as we can and not have all the random things. So we'll be managing the allocation of different clubs as we go. So as clubs come forward, some have already been quick off the mark in the last week and said we're ready. Can we have a conversation? And Adam in particular, because he's just started and his diary's not as full as the rest of ours, we're slotting some things in the short term, and for others we'll arrange, and whether that's based on geography or a range of other factors, we'll make that happen. So please, if you're interested or you want to have that call sooner rather than later, drop a note to hello@paddlescotland.org.uk and we'll be in touch. Someone will be in touch. I mentioned earlier on, maybe this slide's a little bit out of place, but it's really just to highlight this aspect of insurance. And we're not doing this because of insurance. We're doing it because we want to learn from the lessons of these incidents in the past and stop and hopefully prevent future incidents and abuse. But actually, insurance is really important to us. And these things, when things have happened in the past, some of them have resulted in multi-million-pound payouts in our sport and in other sports as well. So none of us want to be in a position where we're not insured. Insurance is there to protect us when things go wrong. But this is the exact words from the insurance broker just a few weeks ago, which actually related to a particular recommendation that Paddle UK had made, not related to standards for deployment, but the principle applies to any of our recommendations or rules. In fact, the guidance set by national governing bodies should be adhered to. If there was an incident and the recommendations were not followed, then the insurers would not view this well, and it may well jeopardise the policy cover. So let's not put ourselves in that position where we run that risk of not being insured. And this is another unsolicited quote from our Child Wellbeing and Protection in Sport course. So some of you have been on that before. It's a 3-hour live module course delivered through Zoom or in a classroom. And a feedback form goes out afterwards every time. But this was someone last week from a club said, I would mandate this course for all committee and subcommittee members in Paddle Scotland affiliated clubs. There is much here that would benefit clubs that don't even have children in their membership. So actually this was really encouraging to me, because sometimes we feel like we're telling people they've got to do something and they're reluctantly coming along, but it's really nice to hear from people who have been on it and really appreciate it. And in fact, that is more or less what we're now telling people to do, is that all of these committee members and all clubs need to, now they don't actually need to do CWPS, I should say, because that's the 3-hour live course. They could just do the 45-minute e-learning if they're not involved in direct delivery to children. But nonetheless, it's nice to get feedback from someone who says other people should be doing this. So that's that. And I'm not sure who's on this slide.
That's
Back
me.
to Lara, sorry.
Yeah, just we're just coming to the end of our presentation, and then we'll address the questions in the chat, and we can open the floor to questions as well. But really just trying to summarize the sort of the ethos here about putting systems in place to make the sport safer, through a sort of a multi-pronged approach, to make sure that we've got people who are well trained, policies that are in place to support activity and support you guys in what you're doing. Yeah, to improve the maybe it's status quo for some of you guys, and you're carrying on with already good practice in place, but a good smorgasbord of stuff in there to help make the sport better and safer for us. So I think we can address some of the questions. I'm happy to answer the first one in the chat from Nicola, which was about the question of being a member of Paddle Scotland when we were talking about coaches and leaders. And the question was, could an international student with relevant qualifications, does that mean we can't use international students with relevant qualifications? I would say with that one, the requirements say quite clearly it needs to be a British Canoeing Awarding Body qualification, and they need to be a member of the governing body. What we don't know about the international courses or qualifications is the integrity of those courses, and that's very specifically why British Canoeing Awarding Body is a regulated awarding body, so we trust those qualifications and we know what they can deliver. There is a but though, and if one of the FAQs is about how you might increase ratios or remit for different people. So if you've got people who are experienced within the team, then that might be a good case for saying they could work as an assistant or alongside and support somebody if they're suitably experienced to do it, to help with the ratios and support that activity that's happening. And I think that kind of answers Colin's question in there as well about someone who holds an old leadership award. As long as it comes from British Canoe Union, British Canoeing, or British Canoeing Awarding Body, it will be fine and accepted. So British Canoeing Awarding Body set up, I think, in 2008, and there are a lot of people out there with qualifications that predate that came. Most of the certificates would have said British Canoe Union on them. They are fine. They're still within our membership record, and we've got all the records of those, so we can validate those ones too.
Shall I take Colin's question on accompanied, excuse me, let me see. So for all your under 18s, you have a parent or a guardian that come along to accompany them. Do you still need a chaperone? So chaperone is a role that's only required in some circumstances. So you might be having a trip away from home, including overnight accommodation, and there then is a chaperone to help look after. So if that sounds like that may not be necessary, but it might depend on the ratio and the gender breakdown of the participants. So not all of these roles will apply to all of the clubs, I guess is what I'm saying. And you can take some judgment on that or get some advice from us. Sam's question around why doesn't instructor have a first aid tick? So what that means is each individual instructor, so this is a paddle sport instructor or a stand-up paddleboard instructor, they don't need a first aid training as part of their qualification, because they're normally operating, or their remit is to operate under the safety framework of a club or a centre. So we don't need every single one of those, but what the deployer needs to do is make a conscious decision about a first aid needs assessment and work out. So it might be that they do need it for their actual deployment, but if you've got 4 or 5 instructors all working together in the same location, then you don't need all of them to have done first aid, and that's within the remit of the qualification. So we're not burdening them with the extra training. Does that fit? Adam might be better placed because he employed dozens of instructors in one location and probably made some judgments on that.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I always had everyone first aid qualified, just because it made it nice and simple and nice and clean. But yeah, I guess the theory behind it is they don't need a first aid to be deployed. So if you maybe had someone operating a paddle sport instructor session in a small area, but you had someone else close by also operating another one, or a first aider on the land nearby, that might be a way to make that work. But in an ideal world, get everyone first aid qualified.
Great, thanks, Adam. Colin, I think we've answered your question about the BCAB versus BCU. Hannah, just to clarify that, so where it says either the introductory e-learning or CWPS, the introductory e-learning is a minimum, and it is enough for some roles, and for other roles, so the introductory e-learning is 45 minutes. It's half about children and half about adults, and it applies to roles where, or to individuals who are not directly working with children. And if you are working with children, you should be doing the CWPS. So it's a minimum. So if you've already done CWPS, there's no need to also do the introductory e-learning, because in effect we're seeing CWPS is a more intensive, more in-depth course. So no need to go back to that. Nicola's got a question here. So by international, so for us, we use the term international to mean people outside of the UK. And also, I guess, following up on Lara's comment about the different, we have other, particularly in the stand-up paddleboard landscape, we have other organisations that deliver training and qualifications in the UK, and this is really important for that, to say that we're not recognising qualifications from those other organisations. We're only from 2026 going to recognise British Canoeing awarding. In terms of membership, then the arrangement between all 4 national associations is that people must join the national association of their where they're resident. So if they're in Scotland, they need to be a Paddle Scotland member. If they live in England, they're a Paddle England member. Wales for Canoe Wales, and Northern Ireland, they join Paddle Northern Ireland. We are aware that there's some people that are trying to join other national associations with different addresses, and that is a concern to us. And in the insurance, just like if you register your car at a different address in order to get cheaper car insurance, that would invalidate your insurance. And the same principle would apply here if people are resident in Scotland but use an address in Wales or England or Northern Ireland in order to get a membership elsewhere, then that would invalidate their insurance.